David Harrison checked his watch as he pulled his black sedan into the parking lot of Oakwood Elementary School. 2:30 in the afternoon. He was early, which was unusual for him. Most days, his driver handled the school pickup while David stayed late at the office, buried in meetings and conference calls. But today was different. His assistant had canceled his 3 o'clock meeting, and for once, David decided to do something he rarely did anymore: pick up his own son. He stepped out of the car, straightening his expensive suit jacket. The afternoon sun felt warm on his face, and he could hear children's laughter echoing from somewhere inside the building. It was a sound he realized he hadn't heard in a while. When was the last time he'd actually been inside his son's school? Parent-teacher conferences last semester? Or was it the year before? David walked through the main entrance, nodding at the security guard who seemed surprised to see him. The hallways smelled like floor cleaner and something else. Maybe cafeteria food. The walls were covered with colorful artwork and student projects. He slowed down, glancing at the displays. One caught his eye: a drawing of a family standing in front of a house. The father figure was just a stick person in a suit, barely sketched in, while the mother and child were drawn with much more detail and color. The name at the bottom read, Ben Harrison, Grade 3. His son's drawing. David felt something tighten in his chest, but he kept walking. Ben's classroom was at the end of the hall, room 204. As he got closer, he heard voices. Children's voices, high-pitched and excited. School must have let out a few minutes ago. He was about to push open the door when something made him stop. Through the rectangular window in the door, he could see inside the classroom. Most of the desks were empty now, but at the back of the room, near the reading corner, he saw his son. Ben was sitting at one of the small tables, his Spider-Man backpack on the floor beside him. But he wasn't alone. David moved closer to the window, careful not to be seen. Sitting next to Ben was another boy, smaller and thinner, wearing a gray t-shirt that looked too big for him. The boy's sneakers were worn out, the kind with holes starting to form near the toes. David noticed these details because he'd grown up wearing shoes just like that. What made David stop completely, his hand frozen on the door handle, was what he saw next. Ben was opening his lunchbox. The same lunchbox that Maria, their housekeeper, packed every morning with organic snacks, fresh fruit, and expensive sandwiches from the artisan bakery downtown. Ben pulled out a sandwich, still wrapped in plastic, and handed it to the other boy. The smaller boy shook his head, pushing it away. David couldn't hear what they were saying, but he could see the boy's face. His eyes were red, like he'd been crying. Ben said something, smiling, and pushed the sandwich closer. The boy hesitated, then took it. His hands were shaking slightly as he unwrapped it. Ben reached back into his lunchbox and pulled out an apple, a juice box, a bag of crackers. One by one, he placed them on the table in front of the other boy. David watched as his 8-year-old son gave away everything. The entire lunch. Ben kept nothing for himself except a small bag of pretzels, which he opened and started eating slowly, as if to show the other boy it was okay to eat too. The other boy took a bite of the sandwich, and even from the hallway, David could see the relief on his face. He was really hungry. Not just a little hungry, actually hungry. The kind of hungry David remembered from his own childhood, when dinner wasn't guaranteed and lunch at school was the only real meal of the day. David stood there, unable to move. He felt like he was watching something private, something sacred. His son, the boy he barely spent time with anymore, the boy he provided everything for but knew so little about, was sitting in an empty classroom sharing his lunch with a kid who clearly needed it. A voice behind him made David turn around. "Can I help you?" It was a woman in her 50s, wearing a cardigan and carrying a stack of papers. Her glasses hung from a chain around her neck. "I'm here to pick up my son," David said quietly. "Ben Harrison." "But I don't want to interrupt." The woman's expression changed. She glanced through the window, then back at David. "You're Ben's father?" There was something in her tone. Not unfriendly, but surprised. "I'm Mrs. Williams, Ben's teacher." "Nice to meet you," David said, shaking her hand. He gestured toward the window. "Who's the other boy?" Mrs. Williams looked through the window again, her expression softening. "That's Kevin. He's new this year. His family's going through a difficult time right now." David nodded slowly. "Does he usually stay after school?" "Sometimes," Mrs. Williams said carefully. "His mother works 2 jobs. She can't always pick him up right at dismissal, so Kevin waits in my classroom until she can get here. It's better than having him wait outside." "And the lunch?" David asked. Ben was giving him his lunch. Mrs. Williams sighed. She looked tired suddenly, like this was a conversation she'd had before and didn't enjoy having. "Kevin doesn't always have lunch. The school has a program, but there are forms to fill out, applications to submit. His mother is trying, but with everything she's dealing with." She trailed off, then added, "Ben's been sharing his lunch with Kevin for about 3 weeks now." 3 weeks. David felt that tightness in his chest again. 3 weeks his son had been doing this, and he'd had no idea. How would he? He was never home for dinner early enough to ask about Ben's day. The nanny put Ben to bed most nights, while David finished emails in his home office. Weekends were spent catching up on work or sleeping off the exhaustion from the week. Does Ben do this often? David heard himself ask. Share his things? Mrs. Williams smiled then, a genuine warm smile. Your son is one of the kindest children I've taught in 20 years. He's always the first to help if someone drops their books. He includes kids that others leave out at recess. Last month, he gave his new jacket to a student who didn't have one for the field trip. She paused. You should be very proud of him. David didn't know what to say. Proud? Yes, he was proud. But he also felt something else. Shame, maybe. Or regret. He'd been so busy building his company, making money, providing a good life for his family, that he'd missed this. He'd missed watching his son become this person. This good, kind person who saw someone in need and helped without being asked. Through the window, he watched as Ben said something that made Kevin laugh. It was a small laugh, barely there, but it changed the boy's whole face. They sat there together, eating in comfortable silence. Just two kids who'd found friendship in an unexpected place. Mrs. Williams touched David's arm gently. You can go in now if you'd like. I'm sure Ben will be happy to see you. But David didn't move. Not yet. He stood there for another moment, watching his son, really seeing him for maybe the first time. And in that quiet hallway, with the afternoon sun streaming through the windows and the sound of children playing in the distance, David Harrison made a decision. Something had to change. He had to change. He just didn't know yet how much this moment, this simple scene of one child helping another, would end up changing everything. David finally opened the classroom door. The sound made both boys look up. Ben's face broke into a huge smile, something David hadn't seen in a while when he came home late from work. Dad! Ben jumped up from his seat, his pretzels forgotten. You're here. You came to pick me up. The excitement in his son's voice hit David harder than he expected. When had it become such a big deal for him to show up? He forced a smile. Of course, buddy. Thought I'd surprise you today. Ben ran over and hugged him, and David held his son close, breathing in the smell of his hair, a mix of playground dust and strawberry shampoo. Over Ben's shoulder, he saw Kevin sitting at the table, watching them. The boy had stopped eating, the sandwich still in his hands. His expression was unreadable, but there was something lonely about the way he sat there, so small in that big classroom. "Dad, this is my friend Kevin," Ben said, pulling away and gesturing toward the table. "Kevin, this is my dad." David walked over and bent down so he was at eye level with the boy. Up close, he could see that Kevin's clothes weren't just worn. They were clean but faded, washed so many times the colors had started to disappear. His hair needed a cut. There was a small Band-Aid on his elbow, the cheap kind from a dollar store. "Hi, Kevin," David said gently. "It's nice to meet you." Kevin nodded but didn't say anything. He set the sandwich down carefully, like he was afraid he might have to give it back. "It's okay," David said quickly. "You keep eating. Don't let me interrupt your lunch." Ben sat back down next to Kevin. "Kevin's mom works really hard," he announced proudly, as if this was the most impressive thing in the world. "She has 2 jobs. That's twice as many as most people." "That is impressive," David agreed, his throat feeling tight. He looked at Kevin. "Your mom sounds like a very strong person." For the first time, Kevin spoke. His voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. "She is. She's the strongest person I know." Mrs. Williams had stayed in the doorway, giving them space but watching carefully. David stood up and walked over to her. "Can I talk to you outside for a minute?" he asked quietly. They stepped into the hallway. David glanced back through the window. The boys were talking again, Ben animated and smiling, Kevin listening and taking small bites of his sandwich. "How many kids are there like Kevin?" David asked. "In this school." Mrs. Williams crossed her arms, not in a defensive way, but like she was trying to hold something heavy. "More than you'd think. More than there should be. We have about 60 students on the free lunch program, but there are others who fall through the cracks. Families who make just enough that they don't qualify for assistance, but not enough to really make it. Parents working multiple jobs who still can't cover everything. It's getting worse every year. What about the school? Can't it do more?" "We try," Mrs. Williams said, and David could hear the frustration in her voice. "But we're underfunded. The district cut our budget again this year. The lunch program barely covers the kids who are enrolled in it. We have teachers buying supplies with their own money. The computers in the lab are 10 years old. Half the textbooks are falling apart." She stopped, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry. You didn't come here for a speech about school funding." "No," David said. "I want to hear this. Tell me more." They talked for another 10 minutes. Mrs. Williams told him about the heating system that broke down last winter, leaving some classrooms freezing cold. About the music program that got canceled because they couldn't afford an instrument. About the kids who came to school hungry, tired, wearing the same clothes day after day because their parents were doing everything they could, but it still wasn't enough. David listened, really listened, and with every word he felt like he was looking at a world that existed right alongside his own, invisible to him until now. He thought about the meeting he'd missed today, a negotiation over a contract worth millions. Money that could solve every problem Mrs. Williams had just described and barely make a dent in his company's quarterly profits. When they finished talking, David thanked her and went back into the classroom. Ben and Kevin had finished eating. They were looking at a book together, something about dinosaurs. Ben was reading out loud, slowly, helping Kevin with the harder words. "Ben," David said softly, "we should probably get going." Ben looked up, disappointed. "Already? But Kevin's mom isn't here yet." "We can wait a little longer," David found himself saying. He pulled over a chair and sat down with the boys. "So, dinosaurs, huh? Which one's your favorite?" The next 20 minutes passed in a way David hadn't experienced in years. Just sitting, talking with kids, listening to Ben explain the difference between a Tyrannosaurus and an Allosaurus with serious 8-year-old authority. Watching Kevin slowly open up, adding his own facts about Triceratops, his eyes getting brighter as they talked dot at 3:15, a woman rushed into the classroom, out of breath. She wore scrubs with a name tag that said County General Hospital. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she looked exhausted. "Kevin, baby, I'm so sorry I'm late," she said. "The bus took forever, and then—" She stopped when she saw David sitting there in his expensive suit. Her whole body tensed, like she was expecting trouble. "Mom, it's okay," Kevin said, running to her. "This is Ben's dad. We were just reading about dinosaurs." The woman looked at David, still wary. "I'm sorry if Kevin was bothering you. I got here as fast as I could." "He wasn't bothering anyone," David said, standing up. He held out his hand. "I'm David. Your son is a great kid." She shook his hand briefly. "I'm Linda." Her grip was strong, despite how tired she looked. "Come on, Kevin. We need to catch the next bus home." "You take the bus?" David asked, then immediately felt stupid. Of course they took the bus. Not everyone drove a sedan that cost more than most people made in a year. "Our car broke down last month," Linda explained, gathering Kevin's backpack. "We're saving up to fix it, but in the meantime—" She shrugged, trying to smile like it was no big deal. David watched them getting ready to leave. Kevin hugged Ben goodbye, and Ben made him promise they'd sit together at lunch tomorrow. As Linda and Kevin headed toward the door, David made a decision. "Linda, wait," he called out. She turned around, that guarded expression back on her face. "I know this might sound strange, but can I ask what you do? For work?" She frowned, confused. "I'm a nurse's aide." "Why? And your other job?" "I clean offices at night. 3 buildings downtown." She shifted Kevin's backpack on her shoulder. "Look, if this is about Kevin getting free lunch at school, we applied, but they said we make too much money." "Which is crazy because we barely—" "No," David interrupted gently. "That's not what this is about. I'm asking because my company is always looking for good people. People who are reliable and hard-working. Would you be interested in hearing about a position? Better hours, better pay, health insurance?" Linda stared at him like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. "You're offering me a job? Just like that? You don't even know me. I know you work 2 jobs to take care of your son. I know you show up even when you're tired. I know you're raising a good kid." David pulled out his business card. "Think about it. Call my office tomorrow if you're interested. No pressure." Linda took the card slowly, her eyes scanning it. Her expression changed when she read the company name. "Harrison Tech? You own Harrison Tech?" "I do," David said simply. She looked at him, then at Kevin, then back at the card in her hand. "Why would you do this? You don't know us." David glanced at Ben, who was watching the whole exchange with curious eyes. "Let's just say someone reminded me today what's important, and what it means to help people who need it." Linda's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly. "I thank you. I'll call tomorrow. I promise I will." After they left, David and Ben walked to the car in silence. As David buckled his son into the back seat, he finally asked the question that had been on his mind since he first looked through that classroom window. "Ben, why do you share your lunch with Kevin?" Ben looked at him like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because he's hungry, Dad, and he's my friend. That's what friends do. They help each other." David sat there in the driver's seat, his hands on the steering wheel, and for the first time in years, he felt tears in his own eyes. His 8-year-old son had just taught him a lesson worth more than anything he'd learned in business school. "You're right," David said quietly. "That is what friends do." As they drove home, David kept thinking about Kevin's face when he ate that sandwich. About Linda's exhausted eyes and strong handshake. About the 60 kids at that school who didn't have enough. About his son's simple kindness in a world that felt complicated and harsh. Something had shifted inside him today. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do about it yet, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't go back to not seeing. He couldn't pretend anymore that his world was the only world that mattered. The question was, what came next? That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying everything from the afternoon. Ben's face when he gave away his lunch. Kevin's thin frame and worn-out shoes. Linda's exhausted eyes and the way her voice cracked when she said thank you. At 2 in the morning, he got up and walked down the hall to Ben's room. He pushed open the door quietly. His son was asleep, curled up under his dinosaur blanket, one hand hanging off the edge of the bed. David stood there in the doorway, just watching him breathe. When had Ben become this person? This kind, generous kid who saw someone hurting and did something about it? David tried to remember the last real conversation they'd had. Not the quick, how was school, over breakfast before he rushed to the office, but an actual talk. He couldn't. The truth was painful but clear. Ben had become who he was despite David, not because of him. Sure, David had provided everything. The big house, the nice school, the clothes and toys and expensive camps. But he hadn't provided the one thing that mattered most. Himself. David walked back downstairs to his home office, the room where he spent most of his time, even on weekends. He sat at his desk and opened his laptop, but instead of checking emails, he just sat there in the dark, thinking. He thought about his own childhood, growing up in a neighborhood not much different from where Linda and Kevin probably lived now. His mother working as a waitress, coming home with aching feet and a smile she forced on her face so he wouldn't worry. At times they had cereal for dinner, because that was all they had left until their next paycheck. The winter he wore the same jacket for 3 years, because they couldn't afford a new one. He remembered being Kevin's age. Sitting in the cafeteria, watching other kids open lunch boxes full of food, while he had a free lunch ticket that made him feel like everyone was staring at him. He remembered the shame of it. But he also remembered Mr. Patterson, his 3rd-grade teacher, who used to keep granola bars in his desk and would slip him one after school, pretending it was because he had too many and needed help eating them. Small kindnesses. They'd meant everything to him back, and when had he forgotten that? When did he become so focused on making money that he forgot what it felt like to need help? He'd told himself for years that he was working hard to give Ben a better life than he'd had. But what kind of life was it if he was never there to live it with him? David closed his laptop and went to the kitchen. He made himself coffee, even though it was 3 in the morning. As he stood there waiting for it to brew, he noticed things he hadn't seen before. On the refrigerator, held up by magnets, were drawings Ben had made. In one of them, Ben had drawn their family, just like the one at school. David was a small figure in the corner, barely there, holding a briefcase. The rest of the picture showed Ben and Maria, their housekeeper, baking cookies together. The coffee maker beeped, but David didn't move. He just stood there looking at that drawing, feeling something crack open inside his chest. The next morning, David did something he hadn't done in months. He made breakfast. Not fancy, just scrambled eggs and toast, but he made it himself. When Ben came downstairs in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes, he stopped in the doorway of the kitchen and stared. "Dad? What are you doing?" "Making breakfast," David said, trying to keep his voice light. "Thought we could eat together before school. Actually sit down and talk." Ben climbed onto a chair at the kitchen table, still looking confused but pleased. Maria came in a minute later and looked just as surprised. David smiled at her. "Morning off," he said. "I've got this." They ate together. David asked Ben about school, about his friends, about the book he was reading. And this time, he really listened. He didn't check his phone once. He didn't think about the meetings waiting for him at the office. He just sat there with his son, learning about his life. "Dad," Ben said through a mouthful of eggs, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you give Kevin's mom a job yesterday?" David set down his fork. He'd wondered when this would come up. "Because she needed help. And because I could help her." That seemed like a good enough reason. Ben nodded seriously, like he was thinking hard about this. "My teacher says we should always help people when we can. She says that's what makes the world better." "Your teacher is right," David said. "And you know what? You've been doing that already. Sharing your lunch with Kevin. That was helping." "It wasn't a big deal," Ben said with a shrug. "He was hungry. I had food. It's just sharing." "It's more than that," David said quietly. "It's seeing someone who needs help and doing something about it. That takes courage. And kindness. I'm really proud of you, Ben." Ben's face lit up in a way that made David's chest hurt. How long had it been since he told his son he was proud of him? How many moments like this had he missed? After dropping Ben at school, David didn't go straight to the office. Instead, he sat in his car in the parking lot and made a call. "Jennifer," he said when his assistant answered, "clear my schedule for today." "All of it? All of it? But you have the board meeting at 10 and the presentation for the investors at 2, and I know what I have." "Cancel it. Reschedule everything. I'm taking the day." There was a pause. "Are you feeling okay? You never take days off." "I'm fine," David said. "I'm better than fine, actually. I'm finally paying attention." He hung up before she could ask what that meant. Then he drove back to Oakwood Elementary. Mrs. Williams looked surprised when she saw him in the hallway. "Mr. Harrison? Did you forget something?" "Actually," David said, "I was hoping we could talk." "About the school. About what it needs. You mentioned yesterday that you're underfunded. I want to hear more about that. All of it. Every detail." They sat in her classroom during her planning period. Mrs. Williams pulled out folders and papers, showing him budget reports and wish lists that would never be funded. She told him about the broken equipment, the outdated materials, the programs they'd had to cut. She showed him the list of kids who needed help, but couldn't get it through official channels. David took notes. He asked questions. He wanted to understand all of it. "Why are you asking about this?" Mrs. Williams finally said, "Most parents don't want to hear about school funding problems." "Because my son taught me something yesterday," David said honestly. "He taught me that when you see a problem and you have the ability to help, you should. It's that simple." "It's never that simple," Mrs. Williams said, but she was smiling a little. "But I appreciate you caring enough to ask." After he left the school, David drove downtown to his company headquarters. The building was 40 stories of glass and steel, his name on the side. He'd built this for nothing. Started in a garage with an idea and turned it into a billion-dollar company. He was good at solving problems, at making things work. So why hadn't he thought about applying those same skills to something that actually mattered? In his office, he called his financial team. "I want to set up a charitable foundation," he told them. "Anonymous. Nobody can know it's connected to me. Can you make that happen?" "Of course," his CFO said. "What's the purpose of this foundation?" "Education. Specifically, helping schools and families who need it. I want it operational as soon as possible. And I want to start with a significant amount. Let's say $5 million to begin with." There was a pause on the other end. $5 million? For one foundation? That's right. And that's just the start. I want this set up so we can funnel money to where it's needed without anyone knowing where it's coming from. No press releases. No photo opportunities. Just help. Real help. After that call, David made another one. To Linda. When she answered, her voice was cautious. Hello? Linda, it's David Harrison. From yesterday. I wanted to follow up on that job offer. Are you interested? I am, she said quickly. I was going to call you today. I promise. I've been so nervous about it. I kept picking up the phone and putting it down again. Don't be nervous, David said. Can you come in tomorrow for an interview? It's just a formality. The job is yours if you want it. Regular hours, weekends off, full benefits, and a salary that's 3 times what you're making now at both your jobs combined. Linda was quiet for so long David thought the call had dropped. Then he heard her crying. I'm sorry, she said. I can't believe this is real. Things like this don't happen to people like me. They should, David said. They should happen more often. See you tomorrow? Yes, she said, her voice stronger now. Thank you. Thank you so much. That evening, David was home by 5:30. He cooked dinner again. Spaghetti this time, from a jar, nothing fancy. Ben helped him set the table. They ate together, talking about their days. Ben told him about a spelling test he aced in a game they played at recess. Normal kid stuff. The kind of stuff David had been too busy to hear about for too long. After dinner, they sat on the couch together. Ben wanted to watch a movie about robots. David put his arm around his son and actually watched it, not checking his phone, not thinking about work, just being there. Before bed, as David tucked Ben in, his son looked up at him with sleepy eyes. Dad? Yeah, buddy? I like it when you're home. I like having dinner together. David felt that crack in his chest again, wider now. Me too, Ben. And I'm going to be home more often now. I promise. Really? Really. I've been working too much. Missing too much. That's going to change. Ben smiled and closed his eyes. Within minutes, he was asleep. David sat on the edge of the bed for a while, watching his son sleep like he had the night before. But this time felt different. This time, he wasn't just watching. He was promising himself something. That he would show up. That he would be present. That he would use everything he built, all the money and success and power, for something that actually mattered. Ben had shown him the way. With one simple act of kindness, his 8-year-old son had reminded him of who he used to be and who he still could be. The world was full of Kevins and Lindas. People struggling, working hard, trying their best, but still falling short. And David had the resources to help. Not just with one job offer or one anonymous donation, but really help, systematically, meaningfully. As he turned off Ben's light and closed the door, David felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose, real purpose. Not just making money or building a company, but actually making a difference in people's lives. Tomorrow, he would start putting the real plan in motion. But tonight, he'd done something equally important. He'd been a father. He'd been present. And that, he was learning, was where everything else had to begin. 2 weeks later, Principal Andrews sat in her office staring at a letter that made no sense. She read it 3 times, certain there had to be some mistake. The letter was from something called the Community Education Foundation. She'd never heard of them before. But according to this letter, they wanted to donate $50,000 to Oakwood Elementary. No strings attached. Just money for whatever the school needed most. She picked up the phone and called the number at the bottom of the letter. A professional-sounding woman answered. Community Education Foundation. How may I help you? Yes, hello. This is Principal Andrews from Oakwood Elementary. I received a letter about a donation, and I need to verify that this is legitimate. Of course, Principal Andrews. We've been hoping to hear from you. The donation is completely legitimate. We're a new foundation focused on supporting underfunded schools in the area. Oakwood was selected as one of our first recipients. But why? How did you even know about our school? We do our research, the woman said warmly. We look for schools that are doing good work with limited resources. Schools that deserve support. Your school fits that description perfectly. Principal Andrews felt tears starting to form. $50,000. Do you know what we could do with that money? We have some idea. The funds can be used however you see fit. New equipment, supplies, programs, facility repairs. Whatever your school needs most. We'll have the check sent over this week. After she hung up, Principal Andrews sat there for a long moment. Then she got up and walked down the hall to Mrs. Williams' classroom. She knocked on the door during lunch period. Patricia, she said, using Mrs. Williams' first name. You're not going to believe what just happened. Mrs. Williams looked up from grading papers. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. We just got a $50,000 donation from a foundation I've never heard of. They said we can use it for whatever we need. Mrs. Williams stood up slowly. 50,000? Are you serious? Completely serious. I just verified it. The money's coming this week. Principal Andrews sat down in one of the student chairs. Do you know what this means? We can fix the heating system, update the computer lab, fully fund the lunch program, get new textbooks, maybe even bring back the music program. Both women sat there, trying to process it. Good news like this didn't just happen. Not to schools like theirs. Not in their experience. It's a miracle, Mrs. Williams finally said. Maybe, Principal Andrews replied. Or maybe someone out there actually cares. That same week, Linda started her new job at Harrison Tech. David had set her up in the Human Resources Department, working regular hours with a desk near a window. On her first day, she kept touching things on her desk. The new computer, the phone, the nameplate that said Linda Chun, HR coordinator, like she couldn't believe they were real. Her supervisor, an older woman named Rita, showed her around and explained her responsibilities. You'll be helping with new employee onboarding, maintaining records, and assisting with benefits coordination. It's a lot to learn, but you'll get the hang of it. I'll work hard, Linda promised. I won't let you down. Rita smiled. I can already tell you're going to be great. And Linda? Welcome to the team. We're glad you're here. During her lunch break, Linda called Kevin from the break room. Baby, how's school? It's good, Mom. Guess what? They have new computers in our classroom. Brand new ones. And Mrs. Williams said we're getting new books too. Real new ones, not the old falling apart kind. Linda smiled. That's wonderful, sweetie. And Mom? I don't have to wait after school anymore, right? You can pick me up now? That's right. I'll be there at 3, right when school ends. Every single day. After the call, Linda sat there in the break room, looking out at the city through the window. She had weekends off. She had health insurance. She'd be able to pick up her son from school every day like a normal parent. She could afford to fix their car. Maybe even save some money. She didn't know why David Harrison had done this for her. She'd asked him during her interview, and he just said something about wanting to hire good people. But it felt like more than that. It felt like someone had seen her, really seen her, and decided she deserved a chance. Whatever the reason, she wasn't going to waste it. Meanwhile, David had made another decision. He started volunteering at Oakwood Elementary twice a week during lunch period. He didn't announce who he was. He just showed up, introduced himself as Ben's dad, and asked if he could help out. The school was happy to have him. They put him in the cafeteria, helping serve lunch and sitting with kids who ate alone. At first, it felt awkward. David was used to boardrooms and business negotiations, not wiping up spilled milk and listening to third graders talk about their favorite cartoon characters. But after a few days, something shifted. He started to enjoy it. The kids didn't care that he was rich or important. They just saw a friendly adult who asked them about their day and actually listened to the answers. One Tuesday, he sat with a group of kids that included Ben and Kevin. Kevin looked different now. He had new shoes. His clothes fit better. He smiled more. "My mom got a new job," Kevin told the table proudly. "She works at a big building downtown now. And she doesn't have to work at night anymore, so she can help me with my homework." "That's great," one of the other kids said. "My mom works at night sometimes, and I hate it." Ben looked at his dad and smiled. David smiled back, feeling that warmth in his chest again. That feeling of doing something right got another boy at the table. A quiet kid named Tyler wasn't eating much of his lunch. David noticed he kept looking at the other kid's food. It reminded him of himself at that age. "Hey, Tyler," David said casually. "I brought too much food today. Would you want to help me out and eat this extra sandwich? I hate wasting food." Tyler's eyes lit up. "Really? Really? And there's an apple here, too." "I'm too full." It was a lie. David hadn't brought any food. But he'd learned from watching his son that sometimes helping people meant being creative about it, making them feel like they were doing you a favor, not the other way around. After lunch, he made a note to talk to Mrs. Williams about Tyler's situation. The weeks passed. David restructured his work schedule. He came in later after dropping Ben at school and left earlier to pick him up. He stopped working most weekends. His employees were shocked at first. Then they started following his example. If the boss could prioritize family time, maybe they could too. The changes at Oakwood Elementary kept coming. Nobody knew where the money was coming from, but things were getting better. The heating system got fixed. New computers arrived. The library got updated books. The lunch program expanded to cover more kids. No questions asked. Mrs. Williams noticed something else changing too. More parents were showing up. More dads, specifically. Sitting in the cafeteria, volunteering for field trips, actually being present. She wondered if it had something to do with David. The way he showed up consistently, week after week, just being there. Maybe other fathers saw that and thought they could do it too. One afternoon, as David was leaving the school with Ben, Principal Andrews stopped him. "Mr. Harrison, do you have a minute?" "Of course." She led him to her office. On her desk was another letter from the Community Education Foundation. "We received another donation. This time it's for $100,000. For new playground equipment, art supplies, and funding for after-school programs." David kept his expression neutral. "That's wonderful news." "It is. But I can't help wondering." She looked at him directly. "Do you know anything about this foundation?" "Why would I know anything about it?" "Because strange things started happening right after you started volunteering here. Money appearing from nowhere. Your involvement in the school. The job you gave to Linda Chun." She wasn't accusing, just observing. "It makes a person wonder." David thought about denying it. But looking at Principal Andrews, at her tired eyes and hopeful expression, he decided on something close to the truth. If someone wanted to help, he said carefully, and they had the resources to do it, would it matter where the help came from? Principal Andrews smiled. "No, I suppose it wouldn't, as long as the help was real." "It's real," David said, "and it's going to keep being real. Whatever you need, you'll get it. But it's better if nobody knows where it's coming from. Can you accept that?" "I can accept that," she said. And Mr. Harrison? Thank you. On behalf of every kid in this school, thank you. David nodded and left before the conversation could go further. He didn't want gratitude. He didn't want recognition. He just wanted to help. The way his son had helped Kevin. Simple and direct, because it was the right thing to do. That evening, David and Ben cooked dinner together. It was becoming a routine now. They made tacos, and Ben helped by grating the cheese, his tongue sticking out in concentration, the way kids do when they're focused. "Dad," Ben said while they were eating, "Tyler at school told me his family doesn't have much money. He's like Kevin was." "I know," David said. "I noticed that too. Can we help him? Like you helped Kevin's mom?" David looked at his son, this 8-year-old kid with such a big heart, and felt that pride again. The real kind. Not pride in accomplishments or success, but pride in character. In goodness. "We're already working on it," David said. "But you know what the best thing you can do is? Be his friend. Sit with him at lunch. Include him in games at recess. Make him feel like he matters. That's the most important help of all." Ben nodded seriously. "I can do that. That's easy." "It should be easy," David agreed. "But a lot of people forget to do it. You don't. That makes you special." After Ben went to bed, David sat in his home office, but this time he wasn't working. He was planning, making lists of other schools that needed help, other families struggling, other problems he could solve quietly, without fanfare, without wanting anything in return. He'd spent years building an empire. Now he was learning how to use it for something that actually mattered. And the strange thing was, this felt better than any business deal he'd ever made. Better than any success he'd achieved, because this wasn't about him. It was about kids like Kevin and Tyler, about parents like Linda, who worked themselves to exhaustion, about teachers like Mrs. Williams, who spent their own money on supplies because they cared that much. These were the people who deserved help. And David finally understood that having the ability to help meant having the responsibility to do it. His son had taught him that. One lunch at a time. 3 months had passed since that afternoon when David first walked into his son's school and saw something that changed everything. It was a Friday in late spring, the kind of perfect day when the sunshine felt warm and the air smelled like fresh grass and possibility. David pulled into the Oakwood Elementary parking lot at 2:30, just like he did every Tuesday and Thursday for volunteering, and every other day to pick up Ben. Other parents waved at him now. He wasn't the rich stranger anymore. He was just Ben's dad, the guy who helped in the cafeteria and actually showed up. Today was special, though. It was the last day before summer break, and the school was having a celebration. Parents were invited to join for the final hour. David walked through the halls, taking in all the changes. New paint on the walls, courtesy of the Community Education Foundation. Updated bulletin boards showing off student artwork. The smell of fresh pizza from the cafeteria, where they were having a party. He stopped outside Ben's classroom, just like he had that first day. Through the window, he could see the kids gathered on the carpet, Mrs. Williams reading them a story. But the scene was different now. The classroom had new books on the shelves, new tablets stacked in a charging station. The kids looked happy, engaged, cared for. David spotted Ben sitting next to Kevin. The two boys were inseparable now. Best friends. Kevin had grown some over the past few months. He looked healthier, stronger. His clothes were nice, his shoes were new, and most importantly, he smiled all the time. Next to Kevin sat Tyler, the quiet boy David had noticed at lunch. Tyler's family situation had improved too, though they didn't know David was behind it. His mother had gotten a job interview at Harrison Tech, set up through Linda's recommendation. She'd gotten the position. Tyler brought lunch from home now, packed with the kind of food that kids actually got excited about. Mrs. Williams finished the story, and the kids erupted in applause. She smiled at them, that tired but genuine smile teachers have when they know they've made a difference. David knocked softly and opened the door. "Mr. Harrison," Mrs. Williams said warmly. "Come in. We're just finishing up before heading to the cafeteria." The kids all turned to look at him. "Hi, Mr. Harrison." Several of them called out. Ben's face lit up like it always did when David showed up. "Dad? Did you come for the party?" "I wouldn't miss it," David said, walking over and sitting on the floor with the kids. A few of them giggled seeing a grown man in an expensive suit sitting crisscross on the carpet, but David didn't care. This was where he wanted to be. Mrs. Williams had one more thing before they could go to the party. She handed out certificates to each student, recognizing them for different achievements. When she got to Ben, she smiled in a special way. "Ben Harrison," she said, "receives the Kindness Award for showing every single day what it means to be a good friend and a caring person, for making our classroom a better place just by being in it." Ben's cheeks turned red as the other kids clapped. He looked at David, who was clapping harder than anyone, his eyes a little wet. After the ceremony, everyone headed to the cafeteria. It had been transformed with decorations and balloons. Tables were set up with pizza, fruit, and cookies. Kids ran around playing, their laughter echoing off the walls. Parents stood in groups, talking and watching their children. David found himself standing with a group of other dads. One of them, Robert, was Kevin's neighbor. "You know," Robert said, "you started something here. When I saw you volunteering, sitting with the kids at lunch, I thought, if this guy can make time, what's my excuse? So I started coming in too. Now my daughter actually tells me about her school day, because I know what she's talking about." Another dad, James, nodded. "Same here. My son keeps asking me to eat lunch with his class. Best hour of my week, honestly. Makes me remember what's actually important." David smiled but didn't say much. He just listened to these men talk about their kids, about being present, about showing up. This was the ripple effect he hadn't expected. One small change in his own life had somehow encouraged others to make changes too. Across the cafeteria, he saw Linda helping to serve pizza to the kids. She worked at Harrison Tech now, but she'd taken the afternoon off to be here for Kevin. She caught David's eye and waved, mouthing thank you for probably the 100th time. David waved back. He'd stopped trying to tell her she didn't need to thank him. For her, saying it mattered. Principal Andrews stood on a small stage and called for everyone's attention. "Before we wrap up today, I want to say a few things. This year has been extraordinary. Thanks to the generosity of the Community Education Foundation, we've been able to make improvements we only dreamed about before. New equipment, new programs, new possibilities for our students." She paused, getting emotional. "But more than the physical changes, I've seen something else happen here. I've seen more parents getting involved, more dads showing up for lunch, more families engaged in their children's education. I've seen kids helping each other, supporting each other, being kind to each other. And that's not because of money or donations. That's because of people caring. That's what makes a school great." The parents applauded. David stayed quiet, standing in the back. Nobody knew he was the one behind the foundation. Nobody except Principal Andrews and maybe Mrs. Williams, who had her suspicions. And that's exactly how he wanted it. As the party continued, David watched Ben playing with a big group of kids. Kevin and Tyler were there, along with at least a dozen other children, all laughing and having fun together. Ben had done that. His son's simple act of sharing his lunch had started something neither of them could have predicted. Later, as parents started picking up their kids, David and Ben walked out to the parking lot together. Ben was carrying his backpack full of art projects and papers from the school year. "Dad," Ben said as they reached the car, "this was the best year ever." "Yeah? Why's that?" "Because you were here. I mean, you were here before, but not really here, you know. But this year you came to my school and ate lunch with me and my friends and came to my class party. You were really here." David stopped walking. He knelt down so he was at Ben's level, right there in the parking lot. "You're right. I wasn't really here before. I was too busy with work, too focused on things that didn't matter as much as I thought they did. But you taught me something important." "I did?" "You did. You showed me what it means to be kind, to see someone who needs help and just help them without overthinking it. That day I saw you share your lunch with Kevin. Something changed in me. You reminded me of who I used to be and who I wanted to be again." Ben thought about this seriously. "So me sharing my lunch was important?" "It was the most important thing in the world," David said. "Not just for Kevin, but for me too. You saved me, buddy, from becoming someone I didn't want to be." Ben hugged him suddenly, his small arms wrapping around David's neck. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, Ben, so much." They drove home with the windows down, the warm air rushing through the car. Ben talked about his summer plans, about the camp he was going to, about how he and Kevin were going to have playdates. David listened to every word, asking questions, laughing at Ben's jokes, being present. When they got home, instead of going to his office like he used to, David spent the afternoon with Ben in the backyard. They played catch. They grilled hamburgers for dinner. They sat on the porch as the sun went down, watching fireflies start to appear in the growing darkness. "Dad?" Ben said quietly, "Yeah? Do you think Kevin's mom is happy now? With her new job and everything?" "I think she's doing a lot better," David said. "Why do you ask?" "Because Kevin says she smiles more now. She doesn't look so tired all the time. And they fixed their car, so they don't have to take the bus anymore." "That's good," David said. "Everyone deserves to be happy. Everyone deserves a chance to do better. That's what you gave them, right? A chance?" David looked at his son, this wise little person who saw things so clearly. "I guess I did. But you gave them something first. You gave Kevin your friendship. You made him feel like he mattered. That's more valuable than anything I could give." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the crickets and watching the stars come out. David thought about everything that had changed in just 3 months. His relationship with his son, his priorities, his understanding of what success really meant. He'd built $1 billion company. He'd made more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. But none of that compared to this. Sitting on his porch with his son on a spring evening, knowing he'd been there for him, knowing he'd made a real difference in people's lives, knowing he'd finally figured out what mattered. "You know what?" David said. "I'm glad I walked into your school that day." "Me too," Ben said, leaning against his father's shoulder. "Me too." As the evening turned to night, David realized something. He'd thought he was successful before, measuring his worth in profits and deals and business victories. But he'd been wrong. This was success. This moment, this connection, this life where he showed up for the people who needed him. His 8-year-old son had taught him that with one simple act of kindness. Ben had shared his lunch with a hungry friend, and in doing so, had shown his father how to share his life with the people who mattered. Sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest changes. Sometimes a child can teach an adult what wisdom really looks like.